Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. I have Rebecca Cafiero with us today, and I am so excited because it's more along the lines of someone that's on the rise in this industry and just getting into her story of how she went from, doing really well in the real estate space and now is completely crushing her network marketing business. Welcome on today.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. So I grew up in rural Oregon. So I'm very much like born and raised a very blue collar farm girl, and grew up pretty low as far as like financial security. We definitely were considered kind of lower middle class, but both my parents were business owners, and I really saw kind of the struggle that they did. My father was a commercial fisherman, and I watched, feast or famine. And when it was feast, the incredibly long hours they worked. And my stepdad was a water well driller, and it was also feast or famine, very seasonal, leaving the house at 5 a.m., getting home after dark. And so from a young age, I said, I don't want to own my own business. I don't want that sacrifice. And I went to college and got a degree in journalism and worked through school at a paper, and then quickly realized I was like, if I stay with this career, though I loved it, I was going to live below poverty level. The entire time I was working full-time at a newspaper, I had to have a waitressing job on the side just to pay rent. And that was in Oregon, not in California where I live. And so I decided to look at going to law school then and getting a degree in law, because the way that I was raised, the only really way for financial security or making great money was to be like a doctor or an attorney. And I hadn't gone to med school. A degree in journalism doesn't really set you up well for med school, but it is a good basis for a law degree. And I figured, okay, I'll go to law school, be in and out in 3-4 years. I knew it was a lot of debt, but I always liked to write, and I like to debate. But I think it sounded good on paper. I wasn't really sure that I wanted to do law, and I ended up being introduced into real estate at around 22, 23 years old, and I heard that you could make 6 figures, without really having a significant education. I have a 4-year degree from a public university, and University of Oregon's a good school, but it's definitely not Ivy League. Mm-hmm. So I got into real estate at 22 or 23 and did really well. This was during the boom. This is like 2003. I was in Las Vegas, so I did really well. And I felt I did what was the smart things, what everyone said, which was to reinvest back in real estate. So I was very fortunate in my early to mid 20s to be making multiple 6 figures, and put everything back into my 401k at 25, 26, into rentals. I bought, and as I think I had at one point, I owned three properties myself and a piece of land, which again at 26, 27, I felt like I was doing really well. And of course, as we know, the recession hit, and Vegas got hit very hard, and my income went down not by 25%, but to 25% of what I was making. Mm-hmm. And also property values fell. So I say that I ended up losing my properties, but I know exactly where they went. So I didn't really lose them, but my 401k went to nothing. My savings I depleted as my income went down, and I tried to keep my properties afloat, and it was really difficult. I am fortunate I was at the age I was, because it was a little like monopoly money. Mm-hmm. But I saw people in their 50s and 60s that I worked with that, lost everything and started over in the age they should have been really starting their retirement. And, that was a very tough time. And you want to talk about high cortisol levels and high stress. And during that time, my boyfriend at the time got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Mm-hmm. And I kind of say that's like the darkest time of my life, because financially I was distraught. I was literally selling pretty much everything I owned. Selling my silver, trying to sell my properties, going through my savings, and getting into a lot of debt, and not doing anything irresponsible, just kind of a sign of the times that they were. And at the same time, my boyfriend was dying. And I remember feeling like so bleak. And I was like, it can't get any worse. And fortunately it didn't. He passed away, but after that, the market started to recover, and I stayed in real estate because that's what I knew. And I had, 6, 7, 8 years in it, and I had a lot of experience, and I just didn't know, I don't know what another industry is that I can go into, because everyone was hurting at that time. So I kind of got back into real estate. I was in the corporate side. So I worked for publicly traded companies. I wasn't out as a general realtor, like showing homes. I worked in new home developments and in sales management. So I was a VP of sales and marketing at my most recent corporate job. So come like 2011, the market was starting to slowly recover. I was starting to like climb my way out of the hole of debt I was in. And I was grateful to have the job again, but the stress levels didn't change. And at one point at 31, I actually went to the ER thinking I was having a heart attack. Keep in mind, I wasn't really overweight. I mean, I was a healthy eater, but my stress level was so high, and it turned out it was an anxiety attack. And of course, they wanted to put me on antidepressants. And I've always been very holistically minded. I've always kind of in my spare time looked at health, and I just said, I don't want to drug myself. It's not resolving the core of the issue. So, I started working out. I tried a couple different, like I did a vegan raw cleanse. I did a couple things that I heard would help release anxiety naturally. And I met my now husband. I met my at the time was my boyfriend. And I ended up getting the opportunity to move from Southern California to Northern California for a job. And it was a long time in the making. He was living up here. We were doing long distance. And during that time, my husband, boyfriend, he also was a cancer survivor. I tell people, I'm like, I don't know if there's a pheromone that people with cancer have, but apparently I'm attracted to it. But he had thyroid cancer years before we dated, but it came back while we were dating. And it was kind of like a wait and see for a long time. So during the process of me transferring from my job in Southern California to Northern California and getting a promotion, they had lined up for me my first day of work, and they were shutting down all the sales offices. I mean, they were bringing in, it was like 40 something employees. I was going to be going over our projections, kind of my leadership style. It was a big deal. And about 10 days before that first day, they set my husband's surgery date, my boyfriend at the time, but they set his surgery date. And I was so worried about the way it would look if I requested off. I was so worried about, this is my first date. They're going to think I'm not committed. This might affect my job. And I was so scared that I didn't ask for it off. I just didn't feel like I could. Yeah. And that is still something that's, when I look back, is really hard to remember, because my meeting was in Sacramento, actually east of Sacramento, and my husband was having surgery at Stanford in Palo Alto. So I went through that meeting, putting on, a brave face, putting on a smile, like just being like out of my mind, out of my body, worried as he's going under the knife. And then I got done with the meeting, and I took off the remainder of the day, and I was driving back from, Sacramento to Palo Alto, and I was crying the entire way. And I just remember feeling like I never want to be in a situation again where I don't have a choice. It was very similar with my boyfriend. He'd be in the hospital, and I was afraid to take the time off work. I mean, it was like, do I pay the bills, or do I be with the person I love? If I lose my job, I mean, I was already in a bad financial place. So, I would leave work at 6:00, and I would drive an hour and a half to the hospital and stay at the hospital and sleep overnight and get up and shower in the hospital shower and drive back at 5 a.m. to work. Wow. And I just said, I just never want to be in a situation again where I don't have that choice. So, little water.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing the vulnerability part of that with us. Not only, I'm sure when you had a significant past from that same thing earlier, then those feelings get re-triggered, and then almost feeling trapped that you have to go to that first, quote unquote, first day, or like first presentation within your first 10 days. Nobody would feel like they could call off sick for that. And that's a pretty significant why of looking for something else.
Yeah. And I tell people, like, you're not, like, I wasn't looking for something else because I was looking for more money. I mean, in my job, I got offers almost weekly on LinkedIn that often were, slightly more pay or slightly more glamorous or different things that looked better. But from the inside looking out, you never know what a situation really is. And also I had a loyalty to my company. I'd been with 2 different companies primarily over 10 years, but it was a lot of the same executive team. So like my boss, who was actually one of my best friends, she was my maid of honor in my wedding. I had a loyalty to her. I had a loyalty to her boss. And so it wasn't like I hated who I worked with. I mean, I hated the stress. Sometimes I really didn't like the things that from a corporate level they did. I hated when I had to cut salespeople's commission because they were actually doing what they were supposed to do. They were selling homes. They were being really successful. And someone in finance, at the company decided, oh, they're making too much money. You need to cut their commissions. Like that was stuff that was very misaligned with what I believed. But at the end of the day, I didn't feel like I was a leader. I felt like I was a manager. But I, on a day-to-day basis, I did like the people I worked with. I just didn't like a lot of the stress and the parts of the job where I wasn't in control, that I was basically the messenger. Mm-hmm. So, I was really looking for a way out, and it wasn't just the stress. I mean, that was a big part of it, but it was also that, here I was in my early 30s, and I knew that we wanted to, we were getting married and I wanted to have kids. But at the time I was traveling 3 days a week typically. And it was usually local. It was by car, but I was in hotels, and I'm like, not glamorous. I was at the Hilton Garden Inn in small towns. And I just knew I'm like, I want to, be a mom. And even though I saw myself as a working mom, like, I don't want to be away from my kid 12 hours a day. I don't want to be overnight, on overnight trips every week. And I watched a lot of the women that I worked with that either had husbands that were basically stay-at-home husbands, or their kids were raised by nannies. Mm-hmm. And I just said, I watched these friends that were, they were leaving their house at like 7:30 or doing early drop off or having, someone take their kids to school. And they were often getting home at 6:30 and getting to spend maybe an hour and a half or two with their kids. And it was like, it wasn't the fun part of the day. It's, homework and bedtime. And I just was like, gosh, I really feel like I just don't want to miss those moments. Everyone has to do what's right for them, but that just didn't sit right for me. So I was looking at like, what are other things that I might be able to do? But we live in the Bay Area, and I was making a multiple 6-figure income. My compensation package was depending on, our bonus for the year, but it was somewhere between kind of on the low side, 150 up to about 240. And I typically was making the 200 to 225 range. And that's something that would be very hard to replace doing something else. And so I said, well, gosh, I looked at photography. I've always loved doing photography, but I was like, it's a 50% pay cut and I'm working just as much. And there's still a lot of travel. And I looked at consulting, but that was a big unknown. And I loved the structure of a corporate job. I loved having the support and the training. Like, I was like, I don't know if I want to come up with like my own products or my own systems or all these different things that you have to really do if you go out on your own. And so I was really not sure what an exit looked like that could still pay my bills and keep us, in the lifestyle that we were used to. So I got introduced to network marketing. It was very funny because I had a big ego. It was a health and wellness company. And first I had an ego about products. I was someone that, was such a clean eater. I mean, just like very much like you, Lisa, I didn't do anything that wasn't organic. I'd cut out gluten. I'd cut out dairy. I was already eating so healthy, but I knew that my health wasn't thriving. And I was like, if I'm doing all of these things and my health is like, okay, but I'm getting sick constantly and I'm struggling with, anxiousness and stress, and I can't lose the last 10 pounds, I thought, turned out to be a little more, then, I don't know what would happen if I didn't eat like this. So I had a friend that had some amazing results with a health and wellness company. And, yes, she talked about weight loss, but more importantly, she was talking about energy and clarity. And I said, like, let me look at it. And I looked at the products and I was really impressed. But once I got past the fact that I'm like, it doesn't come from the farmer's market, it doesn't come from Whole Foods, it doesn't come from like a pressed juice place, I decided to give it a try, and did a 30-day money back. I was like, there's nothing to lose. The products looked really clean. And I was already doing some like vegan protein shakes. I'd already tried cleanses that were miserable. So, I tried the products and I was blown away. But they told me in the beginning, they say, listen, you can share, you can get your products paid for. And being a bit of a snob, I said, guys, like, I'm a VP of sales at a publicly traded company. I mean, I don't know if I said that, but I definitely thought it. I mean, and I'm so embarrassed now that I did, because thank goodness for this, that this came into my life. It's the biggest blessing that I've ever had. I mean, I'd say that and meeting my husband, but it's like closely tied. And my son, of course. But I tried the products and, they were transformative. And even though I said, I'm not going to share, that's for stay-at-home moms and like old women that wear glittery sweaters, which is what my understanding of network marketing was, which was a very antiquated understanding. But I just couldn't stop talking about it. And people also asked me, because they were seeing a change in me. They were seeing, even before I physically was like dropping pant sizes, they were seeing I was glowing. They were seeing I was happier. It was really that mind-body connection. I was changing from the inside out. And of course I wasn't going to like not tell them. I mean, I'm in real estate. So, we always say if you sell a home to a person that walks through the door and they bring back a referral, you're going to sell 1 out of 7 referrals that walk in the door, but you're going to, maybe sell 1 out of 50 people that come in from an advertisement or a sign. So we knew that like referrals are always the best thing to do. They're what we look for. We want to create delighted customers, not happy customers, because a delighted customer will talk to people about it. And most people talk when they're unhappy with something, but you have to really thrill them for them to talk about something that they love. So I was in love with the products. And in the beginning, I just, said, oh, well, it's this thing I'm doing. And, I would tell people, but I wouldn't tell them it was network marketing because I was embarrassed. And again, that was me needing to re-educate myself. But what started to happen, and got to hydrate a little more. Keep hydrating. What started to happen is I also had this idea, again, getting over my being a snob, is that because I was such a clean eater, that's the reason I'd had the results I had. I'm like, well, my body's already so clean that this just like pushed it over the edge to being so healthy and feeling so good. But I had started having friends that didn't eat like I did. And they were, they were coffee drinkers and they were like pastry eaters and, they enjoyed themselves and they had the same results I did. And I went, wow, this doesn't just work for me. This just works for people. Like, this is pretty amazing. And then when my mom got started and she released, 18 pounds and stopped drinking coffee and started having her moods balanced. And I say, but it's true, like healing those products that healed our bodies and helped us both be more patient really healed our relationship. Because my mom and I had friction, like I think mothers, daughters also often do. And we just became more patient people. And so I started to watch all of these effects and I said, gosh, like, even though I wasn't open to the business, I started being more open about sharing, like how good I felt. And I didn't understand how compensation worked because I never looked at it, but I was just referring something I loved. And I actually thought that you got coupons, like free product coupons if you shared, because they said you could eat for free. And I just assumed that's what it was. And probably about 4 months into sharing, I'd probably gotten 10 or 12 friends like set up with their own accounts. And I love the fact that like, I wasn't selling anything. I was just setting someone up for an account. They were ordering what they wanted. But about 4 or 5 months in, my mentor said, hey, how much money have you earned? And I said, well, I've got about $280 in coupons, which were for vitamins. And they're like, no, how much actual money? And I go, what are you talking about? Turns out they'd sent me this card in the mail. And I remember opening it going, I didn't apply for a credit card, but it wasn't a credit card. It was like a prepaid, like a debit card. And they'd been loading money onto that card unbeknownst to me. And I activated it and there was just under $2,500 on it. And I was blown away. I was like, this has got to be a mistake. This doesn't make sense. I have no idea how this could happen. Like, this is nuts, because I was thinking in real estate terms that, you sell someone a house, you get a 3% commission. And I'm like, I don't understand how someone bought something that was, X amount of money and I have this much on my card. But it was because people had a great experience and were reordering. Mm-hmm. So what that happened is, one, that just amazed me. And I said, okay, this might be something I need to look into. But the second thing is, even though that was nice, that still wasn't enough financially to motivate me. What really motivated me is I had a good friend going through cancer at the time. And of course, cancer is a reoccurring thing that's come up in my life. And it's like where my heart is like, I hear someone's going through cancer and like, I just want to help. I want to give. I want to just like do everything. But at that time, we were giving my friend about $100 a month. And that felt good. But every month I donated the $100. I was like, gosh, I really wish I could do more. And it wasn't like I couldn't, but with the way I had my life set up and what was going to rent and what was going to food and our mortgage and food and, my 401k and all those things, there just wasn't a lot left over unless I stopped doing things I was doing within my lifestyle. I didn't have the opportunity. I couldn't earn more money. I was capped with my job at what I was earning. So when I had that money that came in, well, first, I'm not a saint, but first I went and I bought the I think it was Crate and Barrel rug that was an outdoor rug for our patio and furniture that I'd been eyeing and drooling over, but I was like, I can't justify spending that much. Like, it was a couple $1,000s and for the rug and the furniture. And we bought it and I was like, oh my gosh, I love my patio. I'd go out and meditate on it now. It's amazing. I like have happy hour there. But secondly, my girlfriend that month, I donated, it was through her site, $500. And it felt so good. Mm-hmm. And she calls me the next day in tears and she says, Rebecca, we've been praying for that money. She's like, I want you to know that like that allowed us to do, I'm going to get emotional again. She had at the time, she was a brand new mom. She had a 1.5-year-old. She had gotten re-diagnosed when she was pregnant. And she had a newborn and that allowed her to do chemo at home and be able to be home with a night nurse instead of going to the hospital.
Wow.
And I mean,
That
that
level
like,
of giving.
I mean, knowing that I could have that impact. And so what I thought is, gosh, I want to be able to do that every month. I want to be able to, every month when she has chemo, I want to be able to pay for that. Like, but again, I was like, well, but I can't do it for my regular job. But I said, but gosh, I'm loving this anyway. And so let me just understand this. Something that I'm using and loving that I would share for free. But if I'm a little bit more intentional, I can help people get healthy and feel amazing. And I can be financially rewarded and then be able to give more. I'm like, this doesn't even seem real. I mean, I was like, there's got to be a catch here. This doesn't seem real. And all the while, I'm not selling anything because people are paying the same I'm paying.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a 30-day money back. I'm like, this is just crazy. So I decided at that time, again, that's about 5-6 months in, I decided at that time to start intentionally sharing and see what could happen. And I still didn't really understand a lot, but I understood how to share something I love with people. And I started doing that. And that next month I earned like $2,400. I was able to give her another $500. And I was able to, then I made like a triple payment on my car. And I went, I wonder if I could pay off my car early. My car was my only debt outside of our mortgage. And then the next month, I mean, then it started really going. I went to my first event. I saw this bigger picture and I saw something else that I didn't understand. And it was that I saw all of these people at this event that, you know, had so many different backgrounds. I mean, there were teachers and there were like car salespeople and there were stay-at-home moms and there were business people and police officers. There were just people from all walks of life, all education levels. But one thing I noticed that they all had in common is they were like so lit up about what they were doing. They were all talked about having a calling, not working. And I went, you know, I am not lit up about work. I mean, I get home and, you know, before I started my nutritional rebalancing and started using some of the herbal products that help reduce stress, not herbal like, you know, California herbal, but like,
right.
you know, herbal like adaptogenic herbs. Every night when I got home, I just wanted a big glass of wine because I would typically spend my 90-minute commute home. That was my time to return phone calls to customers that were unhappy. Keep in mind, I was in management, so I didn't get to do any of the fun, fuzzy, like warm stuff with customers who were happy. I got to deal with people that were upset. And so it was usually an hour to an hour and a half home dealing with people that were upset.
With like real estate, like
their granite color was wrong. They didn't like the vein of the vein in the granite. They didn't like the consistency of the wood. Their carpet looked slightly different than the sample. The home closing was a week late. So I mean, it was all very minor things. It wasn't like life and death. And here I am going, you know, I have a husband that just got, you know, over cancer. And I have this like, you know, these things that I felt like were a lot more important. And I had people that on a daily basis that were just draining the life out of me. And not saying it wasn't important in their life, but I didn't feel like I was making an impact. I felt like I was firefighting complaints. So this event, I'm like, these people are so lit up. And I'm like, what if this could be like the thing for me? You know, what if I could do this? And earn like, I mean, to me, I was like, if I could just earn the same amount of money, but love what I do, that would be incredible. But then they talked about things like freedom. They talked about things like, you know, being aligned with your goals and your values and your morals. And they talked about something that I went, this is like a dream. They talked about working with who you chose to work with versus who you had to work with. And with my salespeople, not saying I didn't love them, but most of the people that I really enjoyed working with the most, who were just rock stars, who were like so fun and awesome, I never spent time with them. I spent time with people that were in trouble, the people that were on a performance plan, the people that were not doing what they were supposed to. And so I spent time where I had to, not where I wanted to. And that was another thing that drained me. And so I just felt unfulfilled. And what I saw with this opportunity is that so many people were so fulfilled. And they talked about like designing their life. And I mean, I was like, that doesn't sound like a real thing. Like, I can't imagine designing my day. I mean, yes, I could say, well, okay, we're going to have our sales meetings this day. But at the end of the day, I was really, you know, I was a servant to the schedule of like my boss and the customers. And, you know, and I didn't feel like I was really controlling my destiny. So I started to, again, intentionally share. And, you know, very short time in, I mean, those income checks that were coming in part-time, I was still working 60 hours a week, were like 6,000, 7,000. And by like my 4th month of intentionally sharing, I paid my car off 2 years early. And I went, holy moly, like I can see the trajectory. And if I do this full time, I can see that I can, you know, replace my income. But also I was noticing at work, they were like ratcheting up our bonus criteria. So basically what that meant is the next year we were going to be making significantly less money because 40% of my income was in bonuses.
Wow.
So I could be working for significantly more and making 40% less.
Wow.
And that's a huge pay cut.
It is.
And so, again, less than a year in, I mean, about 6 months in of sharing, still working at my job, I hit a rank or a level in my income where I was bringing in as much as my salary. And that's the only thing I knew I had for sure. And so I was able to give notice at my job. And it was in a short time. That was within 1 year of just becoming a product user, within really 6 months of being a business builder. And I know that's not necessarily typical, but when I saw that light at the end of the tunnel, I ran hard for it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, my spouse was like, he was supportive of me using the product. He's like, do what you want to do. I mean, I made my own money. I didn't even ask him. The box showed up. He's like, oh gosh, what are you doing now? But when I started to share, especially when I started to share publicly, he was a little embarrassed. My husband is very educated. He did his his undergrad at Carnegie Mellon in engineering, did his double E at Stanford for his master's, and then went back and got his MBA at Wharton. So he's, gone to Ivy League schools and was working as an engineer. And I can't say exactly what he was making, but he was working for a Fortune 100 company. He'd been, into his career for 7-8 years. And he was making less per month than I was making part-time in my network marketing business. And so in the beginning, he was a little embarrassed, and he'd have people ask him like, oh, what is that thing your wife's doing on the side? Like, is she making any money at that? And he said, she's making more than I am. And he used to joke, he's like, she's making more than me at 2 jobs. Which I love to tell people, like, education or experience make no difference. And that's what I think I saw is, like, as a woman, I could make whatever. There was no cap. If I wanted to make more money, I just needed to work harder.
We were talking about that before jumping on is, the amount of debt that you acquire for that level of education that he had is even in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So your income doesn't meet that when you come out. I mean, you may end up with a 6-figure income, but how long is it going to take you to pay off hundreds of thousands of debt?
Hundreds of thousands.
I mean, years. That's responsible debt, like quote unquote responsible, is to get us through school, right? But it's the same thing. Like I've worked in the medical field for the last 15 years, and I work with radiologists, and I'm able to supersede their income within working network marketing for a year full time. And they're still paying off loans from 13 years of education.
And they're working crazy hours. They're, actually stressing their body, even though they're in healthcare. Yeah, it's insane.
Having to do on-call and everything. Right. And same thing with real estate. I think people getting into real estate kind of have this mentality like they're going to have so much time freedom. But isn't every weekend kind of up?
Even though I was in the corporate world, which is a little bit different, but my salespeople, their days off were like Tuesday, Wednesdays, or Wednesday, Thursdays. So even though I was, quote, off on the weekends, I worked Monday through Friday in the office. I was working most days. I was in there before 8, and I was often, there till 6 or 7. But then I was answering emails, and there was times I'd answer calls till 10 if we got an offer in that I had to do a counter on. But on the weekends, that's when most of our offers came in. So I had to be, at the very least, accessible by phone, but really by computer. And every Sunday night I did reports, and it took 2 hours. And I would always have my family, literally, like, reports were due by 6. They would be waiting for me for dinner, because sometimes I'd be waiting for last numbers from our sales team if they were writing a contract. And I'd have my in-laws, I'd be in like the study, and they would literally be sitting there waiting for me to start dinner every Sunday. And so I never had like actually days off. There was one vacation that I took that I actually got to unplug. It was my honeymoon. And it was the only time, and it was because my boss, like, she basically told people not to email me, and she had everyone take over my emails. But even in the past, I'd been on vacations like in Mexico or Hawaii. I was in Hawaii for 5 days, and only one day I didn't have to get on my computer and log in and do 1 to 2 hours of work. I was in Mexico. I had to fly back early because they literally could not do. And that's the thing, is those jobs, like, you want to know things other people don't know, because it's a little bit of job security, but then you also can never unplug. And so when I was on my honeymoon, that was like my real first vacation. I'd already given notice at work. So I was already kind of like not on the way out. I left on very good terms. But what was amazing is, in my network marketing business, while I was gone for those 3 weeks, I earned $13,000 in passive. I didn't do one phone call. I didn't get one person started. $13,000 passively in that time, which was a huge month. And that was more than I earned in my salary by far that month. Which, I was taking vacation time that I had spent years working up. And
Yeah.
my job actually didn't let me take, I was going to take 21 days. They let me take off 19. And they actually denied my request for 3 of the days. Even though I had the time off, they denied it because they wanted me there on the last day of the month, which fell on a Monday. So instead of
Mm-hmm.
flying out Friday, I had to wait till Monday night to fly.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
It's,
I experienced similar when my mom needed surgery in Boston a year ago. And, I was on paid leave from work, but also it made a difference to me that I didn't make one additional call in my network marketing company. I didn't introduce it to anyone new. And passively, the next Monday, I got a ding. I'm sitting at her hospital bedside and I still got paid. So, I mean, that's the power of residual
oh,
passive income.
well, and there's 2 other times that, I mean, as much as the income is incredible, but the bigger thing I tell people is, I said, this isn't about, getting a house at the beach, or it's not about like, yes, those things are fun. It's not about the vacations, even though those are amazing. And I've been able to travel more in the last 3.5 years it's been 3 years I've been doing this full time since I left my job. I've been able to travel more than I have in the rest of my life combined. I mean, that first year before I had my son, I had like I traveled 6 months out of the year, I think it was, which was amazing. And some of the trips weren't exotic. They were like, I went to visit my family. I normally was only able to visit my family for like 2 days twice a year because it was on the holidays. I was always working on New Year's Eve, and I was able to spend a month in Oregon with my family over 2-week trips. And just even spending the time with my brother and be able to work, and his kids, and be able to work from there. But my husband got re-diagnosed a 3rd time with cancer. It came back a year and a half ago, and his surgery got scheduled for last November. So not 2 months ago, but for Thanksgiving, basically, it was the November 29th of 2016. Our son was about 9 months old, almost 10 months old. And so he got scheduled for the surgery. It was supposed to be like 2 to 3 days of recovery in the hospital, and maybe like another week at home that he'd be, in pretty bad shape. And it ended up being like, the tumor ended up being significantly more serious and larger than they thought, which meant that the surgery, like it was, oh gosh, I'll say like transorbital, but that's not right. It was basically a surgery they did through his mouth with one of the robots, and basically it opened up a 5-inch incision in his mouth, in his throat. It was tumors between his ears, but in his throat. So because it was so much larger, and they ended up having to do 2 emergency surgeries after, he was in the hospital for over 2 weeks.
Wow.
And then when he got home, he was like totally not, he was incapacitated. I mean, I was bringing in IVs, and that was tough. But, being able to not worry about having to take time off, I didn't have to ask anybody for permission. I mean, I just, I canceled all my calls or offloaded them. I mean, instantly, like, I have an emergency situation. I'm so sorry, but like, send them to someone else. I didn't have to worry about the money coming in. Like, yes, I didn't have my biggest month ever, but I had a 5-figure month, and every Monday I got paid. The only thing I had to stress out about was making sure there was coverage to watch my son, and, pumping at the hospital, so that I could be at the hospital at 6:45, because the shift changes are at 7 o'clock a.m. and 7 p.m. because, he's allergic to morphine. And for some reason they couldn't like ever get that on his chart. So I was always like, no morphine, that sends him into an anxiety attack. And being able to be an advocate for him there, and remember the things, because, there's so many people that change, like, that don't remember the things. And as a nutritionist, like, I was tracking like what he was drinking, what he was eating. I mean, my husband's 6'8", he's 200, well, he lost 30 pounds during this, but he was 260 pounds. And when they're giving them the same amount of water they give someone that's 150 pounds, and his pee is amber, I'm like, you need to push his fluids. So being there to advocate for him. And then even when he got home, he wasn't able to swallow water, and they released him. And I was like, this is crazy. This is crazy that he couldn't drink water, and he couldn't eat food. So literally the only thing he could consume, and it was painful, was our protein shakes, like literally meal replacement shakes with a ton of almond butter. But because he couldn't get water and he was so dehydrated, I was calling privately and ordering like a home IV by a nurse practitioner. It was a service not covered by our insurance.
Yeah.
Full of vitamins. And that was $400 a day.
Yeah.
And again, to not even stress like, oh my gosh, where am I going to get the $400? We did that for the first 3 to 4 days before he could start really drinking. But to not be able to stress out about that, about dropping $400 in cash a day, those were the gifts. And that's what I tell people is like, that's the gift. And, maybe it's not cancer, but like everybody needs a safety net, and then I didn't share, but I'll share here, and I haven't shared yet publicly. And so I'm planning on doing this soon, but I don't know what it is about December's. But this last December, I found out actually in early November this last year that I was pregnant, and it was our second child. We were so excited, and went to Date with Destiny early December. I mean, that was another thing, taking 8 days off that I was like, I didn't even answer Facebook messages, text messages. Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins is like, it is all consuming. You're there and you're not doing anything else. It's long days. And I was exhausted. And as healthy as I am, I haven't been sick in 4 years, but I got back and everyone got sick after that event. And it's an emotional release as well as a physical. But I got mono and walking pneumonia. Wow. And the day I found that, I was bedridden for a week, but the day I found out, like through my blood test, I was like, something's wrong. I'm like sick. This isn't just like being exhausted from 7 days of like 16-hour days, jumping up and down to Tony Robbins. But the same day I found that out, we went in for our 9-week ultrasound and there was no heartbeat. And it turned out I was carrying twins that hadn't all the way separated. And, I take that as, I take that as a sign of gratitude to my body, that my body realized there was something incredibly wrong and my body chose to stop the pregnancy. And I didn't have to make a tough decision. It's unlikely I would have been ever able to carry full term anyway, but with that, I had what's called a missed miscarriage, and I'm being super vulnerable here, but it's basically where your body, the pregnancy or the embryo, the baby is no longer alive, but you don't miscarry. And, my doctor wanted me to do an intervention. I'm so holistic. I'm like, I just believe my body will figure this out. Yeah. But I found that out December 11th and I didn't miscarry for over 4 weeks. So there was a 4-week period that I was like mentally and keep in mind, I was sick also from the pneumonia and the mono. Right. So for 2 weeks I was in bed where I just couldn't get out as I was healing. But then even after that, I was so mentally out of it, processing like this while my body was still not releasing. And thank goodness for our cleanse, because I'll tell you, once I did release, like I still was in a 3-month pregnant body with no baby. Like you don't mind when you have a baby and your body is like, your body's all over the place because you've got a baby at home. But when you have no baby, but you feel like you look pregnant, it's traumatizing. And so to be able to cleanse and like now get back into my jeans within like 3 weeks and like look unpregnant again and feel good. Right. Another blessing. But the biggest thing is being able to emotionally take that time off, take off to literally a month from my work. And again, have another 5-figure month. And so, this is just like, that's a lot of dark stuff, but the blessing side of it is that, I was planning to take off the middle of June to middle of July, because that's when I was due. And I said, like, I want to take off the month. And I got an opportunity, now that I'm not having a baby, I got the opportunity from one of my best friends. She's traveling to France for 6 weeks with her 99-year-old grandmother, who's from France, who's lined up like the most amazing itinerary ever. Literally like going up the side of a mountain on a donkey, like just crazy stuff. And I said, gosh, I'd love to jump in for part of that trip. And I looked at the trip and I go, this whole 6 weeks looks amazing. I don't know like where to start and where to stop. I was going to go for, a week or 10 days with my son and my mom. And I talked to my husband and he said, you know what? You had that month planned off, like go, just take the 6 weeks and go.
That's amazing.
And I went, really? And it's evolved into this thing where I'm taking my mom, my aunt who just lost her husband of 50 years, my 12-year-old niece and my son and myself, 5 of us for 6 weeks through France. Like, an epic trip, a trip of a lifetime. And I'll work an hour or so a day, but like, that's the fun side, but it's really to like honor myself for something that happened that was really devastating. And I think in most jobs, I would have had to been back to work in a week.
Totally.
I would have had to been back and producing and like having to really emotionally stuff what I was going through and not be able to take that time and luxury of being able to really process it and sit in it and allow myself to feel feelings.
And all of those things combined, actually, like you wouldn't have been able to go for a week to Tony Robbins and check out from work that long. You wouldn't have been able to, be off completely for 2 weeks. Like, how do you recover from mono and pneumonia at the same time? Your body's really under attack. Right. And then miscarrying twins. It's just, that's heavy. It's so emotional. And I think like you made the point before that, and thank you for sharing your vulnerability, by the way. That's just so touching,
I just want people to know that like the abundance is not, it's awesome to get cars like and pay off your vehicles and all those things are so fun and like being able to buy yourself jewelry or take the trip. But, you really often like, we don't move towards pleasure. we move away from pain. And I was moving away from the pain of not having a choice. I was moving away from the pain of not being able to control my life. I was moving away from the pain of feeling anxious. And, and yes, what I moved towards was freedom of, financial freedom, time freedom, like abundance, being able to, have I haven't even talked about the fact that like yesterday was my birthday. It was my 38th birthday. I'm 38 now. And that's another thing is reverse aging is a real thing.
Yeah, it is. You'd never know.
But no, I thought about it. I was like, gosh, what do I want to do for my birthday? Like, do I want to take the day? I mean, I have the ability. Do I want to take the day off and like spend it at the spa, or like, what do I want to do? And I said, you know what? Like, there's a couple things I wanted to do for a while. And I said, I scheduled calls with 5 leaders that about really vision casting. I'm like, I took a couple of calls, but I was like, I just want to like get on the phone with people that are really excited about like where their life is going. And so I had 5 hours of straight calls, vision casting with people. That's part of what I get to do. And it's literally, I'm like, I can't think of anything better on my birthday. So I still worked the workday.
That's awesome.
Because I was like, I actually like, yeah, I mean, I'll go get my nails done or, get a massage. But I'm like, that isn't as fun and rewarding for me as doing this other thing that like totally fulfills me, totally lights me up, totally allows me to create, totally allows me to give back, all of those things.
That's when you're in your bliss, is like you'll actually take your birthday and choose that.
Right. And I don't call this my office. This is my studio where I create. Yeah. It's my studio where I create leaders. It's my studio where I create abundance. It's my studio where I create blessings and health for people. Being able to strategize, being able to have the community. I mean, I will say, the flowers behind me, all the cards I got, I mean, the text, all the love, a lot of it, even when I was going through my miscarriage, a lot of the people that I was communicating the most with, or that are pouring the most love into my life. I mean, well, yes, I've got friends that I've had friendships for years and years, but a lot of them are people in the last 3 or 4 years that have come in my life from network marketing. Yeah. And I like to say that, like, I don't know if it's that it attracts the best people or it brings out the best in people, but it attracts people that are looking for more. It attracts people that are taking radical responsibility for their lives. It attracts people that want to give back. It's not always about money. It's about people that want to spend time with people they love. It's about people that have a vision of impacting others, not just collecting a paycheck. It's about being able to write checks with your heart, not with your head. That's the people that it attracts. And I just am grateful every day. I mean, literally when I write my gratitudes out, it's network marketing. It's my company. It's the people that have become part of my business, that have become my family.
That's awesome. And I think originally people look at this because they are focused on the heaviness of bills and they see their debt and they want that cleared off. And that's what they picture as freedom. But really it's all the other things that we talked about in this today, is the freedom to be with people you love, the freedom to be with people when they're not well, the freedom to give. And like you said, just, just even being able to take the trip that you're going to this summer, how amazing to just be able to check out and do that, and having a team still running.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the leverage that you just don't really have with anything else. And what I'll say about this, I mean, this is not like, it's not a get rich quick scheme. I mean, it's not a get rich anything. I shouldn't say that. You can definitely get incredibly wealthy, but it does take hard work. And I do tell people though, it's not difficult, but it's not easy. Meaning it actually can be very simple. I think often we go to work to complicate it. But what doing it, like what running hard and pushing hard, especially while I was working. And then, for let's say the next 2 years, what that's allowed is it's not that I'm not working hard. I'm working smart. I mean, I work my business for about 5 hours a day, but it's really funded me being able to pursue other things. So it's like, I have a side business that has just been a passion of mine for years, but it's something I'm like, I don't know if this will make money. I don't really care, but it's funding those. I'm writing a book on nutrition for women that are trying to get pregnant or are pregnant, which, that's another thing. I look at the miscarriage and I say, gosh, this is now a whole chapter that I can put in, that I can have a personal experience versus just, talking about an expert. Right. But it's giving me that 2 hours a day of writing time, because I love writing, but I just didn't do it for years, that I can submit articles. I got published recently in Women's Health Magazine and in WebMD and a couple of other sources of other magazines that I was.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, it's exciting because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I love this. And guess what? I don't get paid for those things. So I get to do something not because I make money, but because it's exciting and I love contributing. But like that book, I don't care if that book makes nothing. I mean, in fact, it probably won't. It probably cost me money. but I feel like I have a message I want to get out there. And I'm so grateful to my network marketing business that it's funding these dreams. So I don't have to chase money. I can chase purpose.
Mm-hmm. So when going back to when you were, pushing hard and you were working your full-time job and this in the pockets of your day, I think a lot of people picture like, I don't have time for that. How many people did you end up needing to sign up to replace your income in that first year?
I totally understand that because I can understand people's hesitation because I did not want a business. And that's when people said, oh, you can have, this can be a business. I'm like, I don't want a business. I already have a job that is like an anchor that's like dragging me down. Like the last thing I want is a business because I saw that as complication. I didn't understand that like a business can actually be incredibly simple and duplicatable. So in the beginning, goodness, it was really, some of it was with bonuses, but it was about, oh goodness, I'd say, maybe less than 100, like maybe 100. And some of those, I had probably 15 of those people that were sharing and some of those people were sharing. And then, my team was, I think my team at the time that my income really started to like be significant. Mm-hmm. My entire downline was about 1,000. Mm-hmm. And now, 4 years later, it's over 8,100, and my income is grown, and my highest month so far I think is 24,000. There's months that are definitely lower, but I'm a consistent multiple six-figure income earner. Right around that 200 mark without. I work less than half the hours I used to. And
that is fantastic.
And I'm not saying like, and I do have an assistant. Like I'm very full disclosure. I tell people, listen, like I'm very organized, I've always been pretty organized. You get more and more organized, hopefully in your business. You figure out how to work smarter, not harder. But I have an assistant because for me, the giving up some of my income, let's say 30,000 a year to have an assistant, that is so well worth it because I call 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock's my happy hour. And that's when, I have, a nanny that is here. I work at home. So I see my son every hour. Mm-hmm. And, so my nanny's here till 4, but even during that time, like I'm out having lunch with him. Like I'm out for 10 minutes of every hour, like in between phone calls, and I'm out, they were making banana bread and I'm out, licking the bowl with him, and, it's organic, vegan, of course. But, I'm getting to do all those things. And, like last week she said, or a couple weeks ago, she's like, hey, she wanted to go to Universal Studios with her boyfriend for 3 days. I go, absolutely. Like, I'm just going to schedule myself off for the day. I didn't have to think about it. And I took my little boy to school, which is, it was like mommy and me. And I, took him to activities, but I planned that time in that, from 4 o'clock to 6:30 when it's his dinner time, like we play, and I put my phone away. I don't take calls. I don't do anything. My phone is in another room. Or if I want to travel, I went to Oregon this last weekend, and, I paid my nanny anyway, Thursday, Friday, but I took my son and, got to do fun things with him and also see my team. I get to build a business where I want to. And of course, being back home where my parents are is part of that. But, I'm willing to give up a little bit of that income to have more freedom. And that's, I think that's the thing to realize is in the beginning, maybe you're not quote making money because you're making a couple of $100. And what you do is you use that money to get a house cleaner, but that frees up a couple hours of your week. And then you can reinvest that time in your business. Mm-hmm. And so in the beginning, you might be reinvesting a lot of what you're earning into giving you the systems to have more time freedom. Yeah. But hey, at the end of the day, I would be happy to work a few hours instead of house cleaning. I'd much rather be on the phone, like lighting someone up about what's possible in their health and in their life than cleaning toilets, for sure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today. I know it's going to like touch so many people, and just even the people that are already in network marketing. I think it's going to really light a fire of what's possible. So it's going to give them the gas pedal they need.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. It's been my pleasure. And I think this is the most complete I've ever got to share. So I just appreciate you for having me on and for like digging in. Cause I tell people like everyone deserves to know about this. It might not be for everyone. I think that in some ways it should be, but at the very least, whether people are doing this for the income or the time freedom or the financial freedom, or just, I have people that, and obviously the products are phenomenal, but I have people that just come in for the community because they want to be part of a supportive community, even if this is never going to be their thing. But, everyone deserves to at least know this as an option. And I'm so glad I got over my ego and I really took a look, because it sounds cheesy, but I could have never imagined 5 years ago that my life would be where it is now. And the amount of joy and fulfillment I have now, I am so grateful for it, but I also feel so much obligation to let other people know that like they can have this. They don't have to just go through the daily grind and wonder like, is this it? Because I know that's where I was at, and that's something I do not ask myself ever now. If there's a day that I'm like, you know what, I don't feel super happy today, I'm like, okay, what am I going to change tomorrow?
Yeah.
Like, and that is real freedom.
Well, it turns the coin that it's almost hard to not say something about it. You know, it goes from like, oh, I don't want to like, oh my God, if I don't tell somebody like how amazing this is, then I, you know, feel like I'm withholding.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I know I'm so thankful to have had Rebecca on today and her expressing her vulnerability. Just wanted to let you know that if you don't currently have an opportunity and you're looking for one, if you're looking to perhaps get into network marketing or just find out more about it, you can text the word increase to 345-345 and I'll send you some information. Looking forward to connecting with you, and until next time, I'll see you on the next episode.